Det var veldig fint at Rina brakte Nantes på banen. I will switch to English again because we have Depuydt that is going to lecture for us on a project she has been involved with, the transformation of the Ile de Nantes that I mentioned earlier, and that most of you will be familiar with. That has been a very much cited example of urban transformation using maybe very different tools and other approaches than we are used to in Norway. Annemie has worked both for as an architect for Dominique Perrault and Rem Koolhaas, leading the Paris branch of OMA, before she founded her own office, UAPS, blir det på engelsk, with Erik van Dale working on urbanism projects, both large scale and small scale projects, I will presume. And she's also teaching at the ENSA Paris School of Architecture on the third year with similar design challenges. So welcome to us. Her lecture is called Designing Dialogues.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this invitation, Maria. After 20 years coming back to Oslo, it's nice. And I hope I can see the city and see the major changements very soon. It's also, I just realized how nice it is to travel again and to have exchange with different countries and different people. It's interesting. And so this is also very, very interesting for me today. UAPS is my office. I founded it 22 years ago with Erik, who is not in the office anymore because he's now only focusing on teaching in Leuven and Ghent. It stands for Urbanism Architecture Projects, and it works in Dutch. This is my main language because I'm Flemish. It works in French and in English, and every letter stays for something else. Why do you think it's interesting? I want to just show you the team. We are a very creative team. We have a lot of fun, and I think you need fun to do urban planning and architecture. If you're motivated and if you're passionate by what you do, you can be very creative and do a lot of things. And this photo is one of my favorites. It's a mock-up of 1-to-1 scale of a street we wanted to do in Nantes with a team. And at the end, we just found out as a theater place, and we were just doing something like Jeff Wall, the last picture of the murder of Charlotte on the car. Well, that's just having fun after 1 year, after 1 day building with paper, A3 paper, the design of the street, because when you do public space, you can have really interesting debates with the different services of the city of Nantes to get something done. We work on different scales. Ile de Nantes is for me already a way ago. It was between 2010 and still today, but just because I'm ending some of the subcontracts I have. But for the meantime, we are working at, I think, an average of 10 big projects in the office in Ivry-sur-Seine. And that is a former industrial site that is also called a ZAC, Zone Aménagement Concerté. It is, I will explain it to you later. It's a tool that we use in France to do urban planning. The city buys a site. Mostly these are sites that were former industrial sites or sites that are not really inhabited or rarely inhabited, and that are ready for mutation and transformation. We are also building a new territorial neighborhood on the Plateau de Saclay, where you see below, it's that's another type of site. It's also a ZAC, but it's under the status of the state. It's not the city that is taking care of that, but it's the state, and it's an agriculture landscape with a lot of infrastructure of road infrastructure, public transport, and especially also a landscape infrastructure. I show you the different type of problematics we have, what makes it interesting for me. This is Vive Babkai. This is a ZAC too of 25 hectares with 17 hectares of one building, a former industrial building that the city bought and want to transform to make it into a new neighborhood. The first phase was done by AUC, that is another urban planning office in Paris, and we won the second phase. How does it work? When you do an urban project in Paris, we only have like a contract for, let's say, maximum 12 years and more now or then 5 or 6 years. And then below, it's another scale. It's the scale of the Olympic Village. We are an urban planner and architect who were coordinating through a competition, and now we are work on site, 6 architects for doing this city block. And this is the whole part of the Olympic Village, and there is another part on the island. And so this is where I am coordinating architects as an urban planner, but within the plan that was made by Dominique Perrault's office and Agence Terre doing the landscape. And I was then working for 3 private promoters to make this project. And then we are also working on an architectural scale. And I think it's important to know that. And I think it's important we do both, because I think the attitude of an architect and an urban planner should be the same, is to try to find the potential of the site, to try to build up possible scenarios and to not determine the space, but to make sure that people can inhabit their space like they imagine it. I discovered after 1 year Villa Médicis that, in fact, we do not use space as it was designed for. We always detour space and we always appropriate space. And it's also a sort of way of being resilient. If I now come to Ile de Nantes and the process, Maria asked me to explain you how it works and not just about the project. So I made this lecture in a way that you can understand what we did, how we did it, and what were the tools we had, and how many people were involved, and how we worked. So I call this lecture Designing Dialogues, because I think that urban planning today is about designing dialogues. It's about negotiating. It's about talking with a lot of things, with the layers of the city, the context, the physical layers, the framework below, the physical context, the people, social, economical, political items are all important to build the history of the site, and also with different actors that are involved with the site. And especially in 2010, we started to think about water management and about continuity of ecological system, biodiversity. But today, with the ecological transition and with climate change, we got in a sort of acceleration where we now have to take care of the print of the CO2 that we have to reduce for 50%. So that has major changements in the form of the buildings and the way you construct, and also the construction price and the quality you want to have as an architect to build the urban environment, and not to forget the people who are living there, and to have an idea about the social environment and how do you make an inclusive city. Perhaps this is not the issue in Norway so much, I don't know, but in France it is. We have a big gap between immigrants, very poor people, and the people living in Paris who are paying a lot of money to get their apartment. So Nantes has a history already for 30 years, and it didn't start only with Chemetov, it started before with the closure of the shipyards. The closure of the shipyards was the beginning of this project, and the mayor, before Jean-Marc Ayrault, that was our prime minister, he wanted to put on the tip of Nantes an international congress center. And Jean-Marc Ayrault won the election, and he said, this is not possible. We can't do that. We can't just put one big building on the top of on the west side of the Nantes. We should do something else. And very, very, very early, he asked, and I worked on that, but I forgot, in fact, because it didn't called Ile de Nantes, but Ile Beaulieu Sainte-Anne. I worked on the office of Dominique Perrault on the urban plan of this island. And even you cannot imagine 20 years later, I do the project with Marcel Smith. That was really weird. And especially that I really didn't have this good memory of it because I was a young project assistant, but he did this study and he, with François Greter, they convinced the mayor that they had to do a more ambitious project on an urban scale and to consider the whole island as a new environment to build on the city. So they did a dialogue. We have a lot of competitions and different kind of competitions. We had a competition that called a competitive dialogue. So 5 architectural offices, urban planners, they discuss openly what could be the program on the island, what can you do, and how you can deal with infrastructure, with program, with buildings, with density, etc. So they bring up ideas, and from that on, the city make a program. And then they give in the last phase of the competition, where you do not talk anymore with everybody, they ask to the urban planning office to do a proposal with the program that is a conclusion of the dialogue they did months before. And this was the one that Shemetov won on the competition. And from then on, he started to work as an urban planner for 10 years. And what is great with Alexander Shemetov, he was having a very good jurist making his contract because he had to work for 10 years. And so Shemetov said, what is necessary when you do urban planning is that you have to be involved from the beginning till the end. And so the contract was a framework contract based on several phases, where you not only do the strategic planning and that you just give in and then you see what happens, but you also do all the feasibility studies for the buildings. You make guidelines for the private investor and developer and their architects. You follow up the project from the permit building, then you go on site and your job is finished the day you say to the architect and his private developer, okay, the detailing of your prototype is okay, the color is okay, you respect your permit building, and the finishing is what we want, you can go for it. That's where it ends. That's why I'm still not finishing Ile de Nantes, because I'm still waiting for the latest prototypes to approve, and then my job is done. This is how it works. And so we won. Shemetov, he stopped the project. He went on strike because he had to implement a big hospital, and he didn't thought it was a good idea that a huge hospital came on the island. And so as he went on strike, the city was a little bit annoyed. Then they stopped the contract and they did a new competition. And Marcel Smets, who knew me from Belgium, he asked me, do you want to do this competition with me? And I said, yeah, why not? I didn't know even who was Shemetov really exactly. And I was one of these people who were not afraid to go and to submit for this competition. A lot of architects didn't do it in respect for Shemetov. So we were lucky in a way. So we did this competition and we won, and we got the next phase 2 of Ile de Nantes. And now Jacqueline Osty with Claire Charter are doing the next phase after the second phase. They didn't call it the third phase because it's in a continuation of what we did before. So what is a framework contract? A framework contract is a contract in little parts. We first have part 1, strategical planning, that we do in 18 months. Sometimes it's more, but we did 18 months to 2 years. And we have to give an interpretation of the island. We have to provide strategic planning. We had to establish all the new things for the second ZAC, the second zone that they were going to develop. We had to also revisit the reglementation of the city. We also have to consult the Samoa. We also have to be there for conferences, and we also do everything that has to do with consultation, with public consultation or concert action, what I think is better today. Then the part 2 is the whole thing about feasibility studies, working on urban and architectural feasibilities, or we are working on a site of like say 12 hectares or smaller sites or like a parcel. We do feasibility studies. We get the program from the Samoa. I will tell you who is Samoa later. And we are showing how you can make specific urban forms. We translate them in guidelines, and we make sure that the guidelines are open enough so architects can interpret them and can make our feasibility study even better and challenge us. And at the same time, through guidelines, we can control what we do not want and what we want. And that is very interesting too. And then we follow up and we monitor in different workshops the process. So the architects, they have to come, they have to propose their proposal, we can criticize it, they have to come back, they make models, we criticize it again, and they have to integrate our remarks or we validate in between what they are doing. And then they do the pre-permit, and then they have the permit, and then it goes on, as I said, till we go on site. And then part C was the public space. We also get the contract to develop all the public space. The project team was in the beginning. I was with Marcel Smets. Smets was alone, and I was having the office, the urban design and the strategic planning. And then we had ProApp, Johan Nunes from Portugal as a landscape architect, the engineering office, and then also Transolar consultants for sustainability. But it went wrong. We didn't get along with Transolar. They were never coming to the site. They didn't practice the site. They wanted to calculate the energy all the time of the buildings. And it was about the public space, the open space, water management. So we had to get rid of them in a certain way, in a very friendly way. And we got then a subcontractor and not a co-contractor because it was not possible anymore. And we took Frank Boutet Consultants, has a very famous office for sustainability in Paris. And I became with the office the landscape architect, what is really weird. And we had to do all the public space. We didn't do all of them because I refused. And we did then afterwards competitions for other landscape architects to fulfill the role of the public spaces. And so after the reshuffling of the team, we went on and we did the project. And then the Samoa. What is the Samoa? This is very important for you. It's an organization, it's a society that helps the metropole of Nantes to do urban planning. So they have a budget, it's a team with a director, a deputy director, project managers, very young people, very interesting people. And they have a budget to buy the terrain and to sell it to private developers and to ensure that the urban planning will be good. They have a budget that calls the CAC, and this budget is the budget for the public space. And in order to that budget, we have to respond with density, because when you sell your ground, you sell it in order to the number of square meters you're going to build on it. So the money you get from the ground helps us to do the public space. What was the major changement between our period and this of Shemetov? Shemetov, what it has is a very good issue, and that we do also is we start thinking urban planning from open spaces, and we start to build a lot of these open public spaces. And he had the budget to start with doing a lot of public spaces without having construct or sold terrains. But then in our period became a crisis in whole France, and the state didn't give much of subventions anymore to the cities. And so through this crisis, we had to first do the private buildings before doing the public spaces. That was the major changement. And this is also the problem Jacqueline Hosty and Claire has today, because the budget is less and less. And also Alexander said that you could do public space for very cheaply, but in between the costs are getting up, and someone still wants us to be very cheap. So that is a little bit the different in the context. What was also good with the team, with the young team, they all had one item to be responsible of. And so, but at the same time, they were having, they were managing with us certain projects, and the island was subdivided in districts. And so they were following up also different projects. And when I had meetings with them, they were all there. And so everything was transversal. So, but that's not only the Samoa is our client, but we also have to deal with the city of Nantes and Nantes Metropole. So I had 3 mayors during this period, Jean-Marc Ayrault, and when he became prime minister, he was replaced by Rambert, and then got elected Joanna Roland. Rambert was very much into the project, the strategic planning. Joanna Roland is less present. It's not the same way now today of dealing with the politics than it was before. You have to know that I met Ayrault every month, once a month, in his cabinet, or just to tell the evolution of the project and how it went. You also have to do with the elected local governor of Nantes, who is the one who hears all the problems of the inhabitants and who is telling them to us, and a lot of other people, and also the municipality services. That is very complex. They all have their proper rules. They are contradictory, and it's the state in the state, and they are not very easy to work with. And then all the people of the public transport and the civil society organizations and the associations. So I was 350 days in Nantes. I did 1,120 meetings. We counted them because we had a Google planning for the 6 years, and it was filled in. We did a lot of, I sometimes didn't eat, and sometimes I had to eat while during the meetings. And the last one is just like this, 100,000 hours of TGV. I just want to say, every 2 weeks, I was at least for 2 days in Nantes, and we worked a lot on the project. So it's not like an urban planning where you go once a month, but you do a lot. We also had a lot of, we had an attitude, is if you have to talk and to discuss with all these people, you have to negotiate, and you have to be smart, and you have to understand what is tactical, what is strategic, and how you deal with that. It can be with your client, it can be with the politicians, it can be with Nantes Metropole and all their services, and also with the private developer, and even with the architect. We also have a method that is research by design. I think this the influence that I got with OMA. We produce a lot. We do a lot of producing. We build a lot of scenarios just to be sure that we can discuss a lot of these scenarios, and we do it through scale modeling. We work only through models. This is my pencil and my eraser. We make models on one scale, 1 to 1,000, 1 to 500, and even 1 to 200, to make sure that people understand what we want to obtain as a quality for the global environment we are doing. We had meetings 2 times, every 2 weeks, 2 days, meetings with the project teams. You see the models behind, and you see the model before. The island is 1 kilometer, so our model was very long. We make it in pieces. We had special boxes. I had a bag to get on the train, and we went there all the time with the models to discuss 1 level higher, 1 level less, because some of us was always interested for density, and we were always trying to make it normal and to be polite with the context. We had workshops with the city council. This is Rambert. So we were discussing every 2 months over the models. And the idea was that all the services of the city was behind. They were, you can't see them on the picture, and that they could hear what the mayor was saying and what decisions he was taking. And we were having these workshops around themes. And every 2 months, we got back on the theme, and then we pick up the discussion where we left it before. And so that's how we build up the whole thing. So every 2 months or every 3 or 4 months, we got validations. And this is really very important. If the politics do not help you to I don't know the word in English. If you don't have their support, you cannot do anything. And you need political support to have a good qualitative project. And that's what we got in Nantes. And then we had this process of negotiation also with public presentations. We did workshops. We invited people from Nantes, from the agglomeration of Nantes, youngest, people that were not unemployed, that were old. We did them work, they work on the project, they have to represent their project, we had to take care of their ideas, we have to interpret them, we try to integrate them. We worked also for smaller projects with citizen workshops, and then also with all these services of Nantes, because we thought it was important at a certain point that they understood what we were looking for and what quality we wanted to achieve, and so that they all could work together in the same direction and not to complot so that it didn't work. So an urban project is a very good pastry, a millefeuille, but it's also all the layers you have to understand that is making the city and how they cross each other and how you make a synthesis of that. So the island, 5 kilometers on one, that's my terrain, but it's not a terrain that is totally a ZAC. It's not, what is a ZAC? It's Zone Aménagement Concerté. You buy this terrain, the state has to approve your environmental study. They have to approve your water management study you make, and you have to inform the people living there what you're going to do on this terrain. That is one specific tool for doing urban planning in France. The east is very natural, and the west is very mineral. And I'm so sorry that I don't have the map that Nunes showed us, but because of the fact that there is a cliff crossing the island, and that's why one is mineral and the other one is natural. And what you can see on the former photo is that the Loire has tides, and the water can go up till 7 meters and can go down. And so it's more natural on the east side than on the west side, where was the former shipyard and the industrial site that is now the terrain of the ZAC today. So one of our, what is important for us and for Marcel and me was, by going there on the island to enter into to respond to the competition, is to try to understand how come that the city is like it is today. What happened before, and why do we have this weird combination of urban forms, of public spaces and disconnected things? And so we went back to history, what I think Alexander Shemedov didn't do. And we discovered that the island were several islands. And we discovered on this map that there was an agricultural structure here, and that the bocages were in the direction of the water system, and that the site already was the former industrial area on the west side, and that in fact the island was in the periphery of the historical city. And further on, we even discovered that some of these arms of the Loire are now some infrastructures, like the highway infrastructure, or a street that goes, the only street that goes diagonal. We discovered through the photos how the site was changing, and you see here is the former hospital that is now going to put on the islet itself, and that everything was very, very industrial. You see also how through filling up the terrain, the city tried to conquer more terrain and to extend in 34. And we see the first big streets cutting vertically the island. So through this historical study, we try to understand why we discovered 7 neighborhoods, 7 districts that has nothing to do with each other, and that were having different types of organization. That was the first step. The second was the demand to implement, to do the implementation of a hospital that was in the beginning 80,000 square meters, but when we started, it was a building or different buildings of 350,000 square meters. That is as big as the Library of France I worked with Dominique Perrault. So that needed a terrain of 10 hectares. But if you knew the project of Shemetov before, the island was sort of a graal, was something very intimate, just a place where it was really cool to be there and not very metropolitan. But if you're going to put a hospital of this size on this island, that means that the status and the idea of the island is changing. And especially when you see it in these models. You will see this model is one of the latest models we did, where we put the hospital over there. But it doesn't mean it was there all the time. In the beginning, we had to do it over here. So that's why you have we worked during 2 years on 2 sites, because when we were having the discussion of having the project on the site in the middle of the island on the west side, where you have a very dense city, and then here we had to fill up the rest, we were wondering with Marcel, how can you do a big piece of meat, we call it an escalope in France, of 350,000 square meters? We will cut the site in 2, and that is not possible. So we need to work with the people of the hospital doing the program for the next competition to get through it. We need to work with them to make a hospital, and that you have the blue foam, that you have also buildings on around that are connected to the hospital, but also connected to the city. We got discussions for more than 2 or 3 years, and it was really impossible to get along with the people, the direction of the hospital, the staff, and even their consultants, helping them to build up the program for the competition. But what we did also, and this is also one of the methods of the project, we proposed with Marcel when we were doing the competition that as you work with an urban planner for 6 years on such a big scale, it would be good if we have a circle of quality. A circle of quality is, we said to Samoa, we need to invite specialists that can criticize our plan for the moment. We need to see them 2 times a year at least, so they can see what we are doing and they give them our advice. So it's not only we are always between us, let's see what others think of our strategic planning. So we got Henri Bava as a landscape architect, Jean-Louis Subilot as a director of another company like Samoa in Euralille. We got we got Bourdin as a sociologist. We got Christiane Boret, who is a bouwmeester in Antwerp. This is Henri. Ariella Masbonji, we call her the Pope of urbanism in Paris because she's doing a lot about urban planning. And Sola Morales is not on this picture because that was later on, because unfortunately he died during the process. And when we were discussing that we had so many problems with the implementation of the hospital, they said, well, what is your plan B? And so I said, plan B? Yeah, they said, what is your plan B? Because the protocol between the hospital and the city of Nantes was already signed. The terrain was limited, everything was ready for getting into the competition. And then what we did is with Jean-Marc Ayrault, we asked him, shouldn't we bring the hospital back to that place in front of the Loire if they do not want to cut the hospital, and if they don't want to make the passage in between, at least we are in front of the river. As a scale, it will be better. We can build the city and continue the city here and make sure that in the middle, it is totally a normal city, a neighborhood. Perhaps this is better. And he said, okay, you can do that. So for 2 years, we were doing discussions on one plan with the people of the hospital, and on the other side, we were making the other one. And then during the Rambert period, we told the directress of the hospital that we were going to change the place of the hospital on the south side, also in connection with Saint-Jacques is another hospital site where they have all the logistics, and telling them that it was more easier for them to be here than into the middle. We made prescriptions. It is a booklet of 100 pages, urban and architectural prescriptions for the people doing the competition. And these are handmade sketches I did because they thought, the people of the hospital, when it's hand drawings, it's not so fixed. And then they thought that if you do it in Photoshop or Illustrator, that means that it's totally, you can move it. And when it's a hand drawing, they thought it was better. So I made the whole booklet by hand drawings. And so these are the type of prescriptions we are giving to the architects for the competition, and to hope they will follow them, they will challenge them. And hopefully a Belgium team with a French architect Pargade and Art and Build is a Belgium team, won the competition and made a hospital of different buildings with public spaces in between, with as much as possible a little bit of landscape, knowing that below you have the parking levels and not the technical level, but the parking levels. And so what I did afterwards was monitoring the project until the permit building. I had to check that everything they proposed during the competition was still there as a quality when they were giving in the permit building. A third item of the project is transition. We had to make a transition between this big scale project and the rest of the city, especially if you look to the typology and the granulometry of the buildings. So we thought that the Metropolitan Park was good for several reasons, because of the fact that this park would be a space at different scales, and would be the first big green space on the west part of the island, what is the most profound, where you have the biggest depth of the island, 1 kilometer. Also, we thought that it could be an urban attraction and that it would help to make sure that what Shemetov did with, where you saw the picture of the elephant, the former shipyard, that is a big mineral space because he uses and he kept the space as it was. The park would start from the north till the south. That was our idea, and to federate people over there, and also to help the water management of the new urban evolution. And then the fourth item that was important for us was, what about the status of this Ile de Nantes? And Marcel, and this is really his idea, talked about the meta center. He said the west part of Nantes will be the meta center. And why the meta center? It comes from the navigation. It's the center next to the city center, and it's the complement of the city center. It is not taking the role of the city center, but it allows the city center to extend on the other side of the river. And you see here how close the 18th century district of the city center is to the Nantes. And indeed, it happened before, like the chess play we had in the former presentation. What was going on was already going on till many years, even before Shemetov came in. Jean-Marc Ayrault decided to put the Palais de Justice on the island. Then he decided with Shemetov to put the architectural school, and then we got the School of Beaux-Arts coming on the island, and then the island got the hospital. That means that in fact the island became the privileged place to do the extension and the complement of the city center that is very small if you look to it in the agglomeration. And that means that the island got a new role, and that the island was not something far away, but something different. And it happens so that you need different programmation. So we need to think about what type of housing, what type of programs, what type of equipment, what about what is happening on the east side in order to the west side? How should we connect with the projects going on the other side around the railway station today, the project Eura Nantes? And what about the connection with the city center? And so we said that we were building like a sort of a multipolar city on the scale of Nantes, on the city itself. And these are drawings that are just showing how important this park becomes here on the west side, how important this place has to be connected with the city center, and how we also need connections east and west for making it work. So that is how I introduced accessibility, because putting a hospital that is in fact the reunion of all the hospitals in the agglomeration of Nantes on one spot, that means it has to be very accessible. Accessibility is also talking about public space. So we thought that it was important to restructure the whole road network and to make sure that we had straight connections. For instance, this connections today doesn't exist. When you come in Nantes, you have to do this. And what we did was getting a straight connection so that the new neighborhood we were planning on the west side could be just a neighborhood with a slow city where you have more alternative mobility that is important than cars. We also thought that we need to reconnect the East-West movement, and especially also with the public transport. And this is very important because we used the need of public transport as a way to structure the site and as a way to create public space from facade to facade and to change the environment of parts of the city that were not taken into consideration before. And you see also that we proposed not only a bus that has his own his own path to cross the island, but also a new tram system. And we also produced other lines of trams so that we get a network and not only a star system, because when you looked to the agglomeration and the transport of the tram today in Nantes, it's a star, and there is one connection point for all the lines. And by doing this, we were thinking on the scale of Nantes and this agglomeration, and we were putting a network. And so the way of getting the public transport through the agglomeration was much more organized. So what we did on the island was not only for the island, but has an impact on the whole city. So it means that we were looking on different scales, and we were always considering what would happen with our intervention on the scale of the island on the global scale. And then the last part of our cahier de charge, what we had to do was to develop the Southwest, what was a new scope of intervention, a big terrain that was a former terrain of industrial zones where a lot of industries left the island and they left the terrain. So the Samoa bought it and to develop it. So also that was for us important to see what was happening below. And so we had to think with the project of Reichen, of Bas-Chantenay, and of Aubras on Termille-les-Îles, because we were not only taking into consideration what was going to happen on the southwest of the island, but also on the total west of Nantes, where we would have 203 hectares to be developed in the coming years, because we made the strategic planning for 2030. And so that means 25,000 new inhabitants over there. What is important for what you put on the different size. And so we looked for coherence. And so we adapt our drawings, and we were also trying to work, but it didn't work very well, but we tried to see what others were doing and to make sure that we got connections between our planning and theirs. And so we make all these maps to try to understand and to show the city and the politics, how important everything became, and how the Meta Center and its extension was really the big complement to the historical city. And then the Plan Guide changed, and we called it the Plan des Transformations, the plan of the transformations. And we did it with purpose. We upgrade this plan every 9 months. This plan is not a master plan. And if you look closely to the plan, it shows the structure that we made, that we called the landscape figure, and that is coinciding with the public transport. This plan, if you look at very closely, will never define the plan. You saw the model. The model is a working model. It's not a presentation model. The model is a discussion model to see how dense or how less dense and how you can develop a site. But that doesn't mean that the model will last till 2030 or 40. What we did was to find a way to design a plan or a strategic plan where we show the sites with the grid where we will intervene, where we superpose still what is still going on, so that these people are not afraid and have the feeling that they have to leave very early the site and that they are, the people working there, that they will be unemployed. And when we discussed the planning with Samoa and when they approved what we did, and when we worked with architects on the permit building, then we raised it up in 3D. And when the plan was changing and when some sites were disappearing because we thought that finally it isn't worthwhile to develop certain sites, well, we changed the plan. So this plan was in effect a plan we worked on for 3 months, one person full time, just to understand how we could just translate the way of doing urban planning through the years and how we can take into account the timing of a planning. And this is quite important because the whole plan was structured by this landscape figure, what you see here. And this landscape structure is like the structure that everybody will build through time, and that also Jacqueline and Claire are building now again and will stay till the end. But the sites that are around it, the perimeter of the site can change because of opportunities, because of things we do not control. And so this landscape figure was also for us a way to federate the 7 districts you saw in the beginning and to make sure they got connected, because the landscape figure is also a figure where you have public space, because the infrastructure that we needed to build to make accessible also the hospital helps us to create public space, to give green spaces, to give playgrounds, and to make sure that people can meet each other in their neighborhood. And that helps us also to keep the character of every district and to make sure that when we will work on architecture projects, that we don't use a generic concept. I think that urban planning should stop using the alphabet for making prints of buildings. When you look to urban planning, we see too much O and H and E and F and whatever, and that you can really try to find out a building form that is responding to the site. That doesn't mean you're doing contextualism, but that doesn't mean we imitate what is there before, but that you try to make it more contemporary, but in a certain way, you don't lose the aim or the character of the place you built in. The figure is also a way to arrange the water management, to have an ecological continuity, to introduce biodiversity, and to generate public space. And to generate public space where you didn't thought it could be. And so we did a lot of them. I will not commend them all because I don't know if my time is up. But we made promenades, we did some minor interventions, we put some blocks on a former building, and we hope the skates were coming. We make sure that adults could have spaces they can appropriate without determining them in spots they are not controlled by their parents and nobody sees them. We make sure that you can walk and you can bike and that you can just discuss, and that there were public furniture. And so there was the whole idea of making the city active and intense and not only dense, because I think density has to be translated by intensity and is also a way of perceiving things. And we also challenged the norms. The first photo you saw of my team was when I was very motivated, ambitious to try to find out new pedestrian ways and new ways of designing the white lines on the streets. And I learned by heart the interministerial reglementation. When do you need a stripe? What is the thickness of the stripe, etc. So I could detour and do something manipulated. And we got through the project, the design project, and it was allowed. But when we went on site, the city and the services of the Nantes Metropole came back to it, and they didn't allow us to realize what we did. And at one point, someone asked me for one street to do a project for only 10 years to make sure that the bikes and the cars would slow down and that the connection between the two parts of the street would be better. And they said, well, do your project again of the pathways and try to make it again more fun. And I said, no way. I'm not doing that because I work day and night to try to do it and it will not work. But let's ask an artist and let's work with an artist. If I have an artist, perhaps he can. And so we worked with an artist and we did that. And we did platforms of 34 meters with funky lines instead of pedestrian lines, and it worked. And they did. And even the street goes like this to slow down the cars, just to say that that is having fun with urban projects, and also to integrate the artistic branch is interesting, especially on Nantes, because why Nantes works so well, it's also because the mayor, he does a lot of happenings, and not only on the cultural level, but also on the ecological level. And so they made a green city, and the green city on the whole city of Nantes was to invite associations and people to experiment with green space. And so these experiments help us to prefigurate and to think about the uses and the interest that the people have for public space and what they think about green spaces and how they want to use it and how they want to appropriate it. And so through all these experiments that is also governed through the city, we could do a lot. Finally, how then did we do with the strategic sites and with the private developers, promoters, we call them, and their architects? First of all, the strategic sites, we do Brosset, is 1.7 hectares. This is a project where we had to make a feasibility study for housing and to make sure that we did the combination between the typical building blocks that is not social housing, but it is free housing of the 60s with office buildings of the 80s. How do you do that? And how do we can build 30,000 square meters on that site? So someone asked us, we come with our models, with all the ways of trying to put scenarios in front of them and to see how we do. And so these are like an extract of the urban invariants that the architect gets with the models, that the architect gets as guidelines when he do his project. And then what we do is, first of all, there is no competition. The competition for architecture is only when it's a very important site. But mostly we invite 5 architects, 5 architectural offices to come and they are getting selected. I have the possibility to put a list. All the architects become my best friends in a way. I can, and at Christmas I have a lot of presents and books and portfolios, because we make lists of offices, international and national, what we think are interesting. And in order to the typology of the site, their style, their way of thinking, their way of working, we propose them to the private developers, and the private developers also come with their list, and I can have the possibility to refuse them and to replace them with others. So we start to negotiate with the list of the architects, and then I can also ask the private developer to give a full mission to the architect, and that the architect also can do the control on site, and that he can have all his engineers within his team, and that it's not the team of the private developer, the engineering, to do the engineering, but it's all in one team of the architects, what is quite difficult to obtain in France for the moment. And then when they come, we ask them 5 questions. They get our guidelines, and we ask them 5 questions, and they have 20 minutes to respond to these 5 questions through images or through sketches without doing a project, and through references of their work or other works. And so we can discuss with them, and the promoter can understand who is in front of him and how he reacts to his site, to a program. And we can understand if he understood well what we were aiming, or if he has better ideas. And then they got selected. And then we do project monitoring meetings, and some of them can take a long time. It could take a year to get a permit building, because we do not agree on what they are doing, or then they got problems with the cost, and they got problems with the program. And so we are trying to find all the solutions to get the quality of the project through project monitoring. And so you see, for instance, evolution between that was a competition, because it was a very important site, between a competition phase, a schematic design phase, and then the final permit submission. You see how it changed. And you see also that we are negotiating and trying to get the best of it. And that asks a lot of energy for the architects and for us, but it helps quite well. And I should have, yeah, you have a photo here. This is Lan, his famous Procet terrain. And what is also interesting, we invited Lan to invite 2 young officers, and they do not do the competition, and they don't have to explain anything. But we think, and I think it's also an idea that Marcel did in the Flanders when he was the bouwmeester, it is very important to use this opportunity to give jobs to people who are creating their office and who are starting their office. And so we always combine, let's say, an office that is already installed with a younger office to make big projects on all the urban projects I do. So this is the public space that they made on a private site, and that is the promoter is paying for it, but then is then giving it back to the city, and the city will then clean it and how do you say, take care of it during time. And then on the strategic side, one of the strategic sites is this neighborhood of more than 100,000 square meters. And what is interesting for me is that I extended my role as an urban planner, not only to control volumes, but also the quality, not only of the architecture, but the content. And I'm married with a promoter. My husband is a promoter. And when I discuss with promoters, he's always afraid I will have no job anymore. And because I'm quite tough and I ask for a lot. And I said to him, okay, I'm going to ask 2.70 meters ceiling height, free ceiling height in the apartments, because I'm tired of 2.50 meters, especially when you have bedrooms of 9 square meters. Our apartments are very, very, very small. And I will ask them to this and this and that. And he said, oh God, don't do that. You will have them all as enemies. And I said, no, I will do that. And I said to the Samoa, listen, can I just meet one of these private developers you work with, that I can discuss with them, and that I can discuss urban planning and our ambitions, and can I interrogate them and just ask him what they think about this and this and that? And we did that in a very informal way. And all these people were very, very involved and surprised, but not saying no. And they were rather interested. And so what we did afterwards, to make it more serious, we did urban form workshops. It's a translation from France. We did a casting. We asked the people who are constructing social housing, private developers, architects, to send us a motivation letter, and it was done in association with the Samoa and the House of Architecture, to send us a motivation letter to make part of our discussions about housing tomorrow. And we had a special office who was preparing that, and we were having several workshops under several themes: good quality housing, construction price, how to share spaces with people, how to try to get sociability. And so we invented the word maîtrise d'usage. It means when you do in French, maîtrise d'œuvre, that means you're going to build and you're concerned with the œuvre, with the work. And maîtrise d'ouvrage means I'm concerned with how you will live and inhabit. And so we talked about 2.70 meters ceiling, free height for the apartments. How can you make bigger apartments with less money? How can I make the extra space, the extra bedroom space? How can I change typology today? How can I have my roof on the 3rd floor as a garden that I can share with all the people inhabiting? How can I make my bike, the place where you park your bike bigger with a place where I can do something else? Can I have an office space where the meeting room becomes a special room during the weekends for the people having there, and that they can hire it for a party or for meetings and discussions, etc. So in 2011, we started with that, and it was a big success. And we got a lot of promoters who had to do this. And they were so proud because Nantes is so well known. They are so proud to be selected to develop a project that they have all this ambition. But what they didn't know that they have to keep it till the end because we were controlling it. And so we did this a lot of work of how we could make this and how we can have shared spaces, shared conciergerie, how we can have cultural spaces in the ground floor, how we can have transitory urbanism, what is now normal and even dangerous because the promoters, they use it as a recipe to get work. But you can't do it everywhere and you can't do it always the same way. It's quite specific. But we did it and we got it done. And we did it for I think, almost 60 projects in 6 years. Yeah. It went very well and very fast because there was a sort of a boom and a sort of a dynamic, what is now less dynamic, but that was what we did in the 6 years. And I hope it was not too much and, and that it was clear enough. That's where ends my story here.
Thank you, Annemie. That was really exciting to hear. And I think it's particularly interesting because Ile Nantes is such a reference project as best practice, particularly within planning circles. But seeing this presentation, there are things that are, as you pointed out yourself, extremely important, like the monitoring aspect. That really is a tool on the large and small level to help ideas develop to more than competition renderings, etc., and become consistent projects. You have this ability or the accentuation of situating the project within the larger realm of the city or the territory, as we call it, so that you can develop the city without necessarily suffocating or challenging other parts of the city. But what I also find is an extreme emphasis of and responsibility to the involved designer. Just from Chemitov on top, the big narrative that he provided, and also for Marcet Smets and yourself, where you have a lot of power, a lot of leeway, and also an extremely demanding position that you have to take huge amounts of responsibility. You seldom see a designer in the context of Norway would get. So what I would ask you to shortly reflect on is what is the translation potential of the Nantes model or rule, règle with Jouet? What would you bring forward to the next project or in a context like Norway, and what was so specific to the extreme amounts of energy that was poured into Nantes at the kind of same time?
Yeah, first of all, there is a huge organization for Nantes, and this is exceptional. It's not everywhere. The Samoa is a group of people that are only dedicated to the island. And when you work with other organizations like Ivry-sur-Seine, SADEV 94 is the like Samoa, they have a much larger territory and they don't have all these people for one territory. So, and also they have the money to pay us and to make sure that we can do that because it costs money. You need a budget for that. And Samoa is exceptional in France. I work for several now, but what I think is interesting is what I said. If the politics are not with you, you cannot do anything. You can make strategic planning whatever you want. If they do not understand what you're looking for, it doesn't work. If you cannot follow up the architecture, you cannot have this quality. And what I'm doing now, Samoa is like an example for other aménageurs in France. And what I'm doing now is try to, as I was, you know, we worked so hard. My office was the extension of Samoa, as Samoa was the extension of my office. And what was very, I was very lucky because they discussed all these problems they had openly with us. So I was aware of everything. And I learned about it, and I learned what the difficulties they have. And so we could discuss everything open. And you don't have that, this transparency, and it's extremely transparent. So as transparent you can be, how better you can work with them. And so as I learned so much, I try to put that in the projects we have, and we try to propose the same way of working to other people we're working with. I don't know how it works in Oslo. I think in France, you have private developers who are doing strategic planning too with architects, but they know they need urban planners. And so they pick up the urban planners as we are. And some of the offices in the beginning were refusing to do that because that was for private developers. I do it because I think it's very interesting that they ask us, that we can help them. The problem is just that they always have their private ideas that are they can do whatever they want. When you work with a public institution, you can have a control and you can refuse some things. So I don't know how Norway works, but it depends to the scale. When you have a city block, you can do it with a private developer, but if you have a bigger scale, I think the best is to work with a public institution to get to control, and this is very important. And you also have to know, if you want to do this, they ask me a lot. I have to be present every time. So it's not like an architecture project. You send your project manager to the client. You really have to be there. You have to follow up. You have to be there for the consultation. You have to be there with the politics. I have to be there in front of the promoter. And I'm also a very engaged person. Not everybody is putting all that energy in it, and I'm fighting for it, and I take risks. But I don't know if I answer your question, but I just had this great opportunity, and I was so lucky. I'm so lucky I could just have this experience that I can use it now for going elsewhere and to see how it looks. And it's impossible to copy paste something. It's impossible to copy paste. But what I think is the most important thing, that's why I talk about designing dialogues, is to discuss with several people the project and just to have global discussions. And I think, and mostly today, I think my role is to be a sort of finding the balance between what everybody is looking for and to make a synthesis of what everybody is asking and to find the direction and what we call récit urbain. I don't know how to translate that. As the story we're going to tell, that has to incorporate the political engagement, the social environment. We have to tell the story that is a good story, and to find out how I can work with all the people that are involved with the city making, and to find a good balance. And I'm always try to find a way to understand the architect, to understand the landscape architect, because I also have to discuss with my own team. We having big teams. I don't know how it works here, but in our team, you have today, for instance, I have in Ivry-sur-Seine, I have the Office of Sustainability. We have the landscape designer. We have an anthropologist. We have a lot of people working with us, and I have to listen to everybody and to understand their objectives and their goals, what they want, the one of the politics, the one of the aménageur, the one of the private promoter, and to find a way to keep the balance and to make a qualitative project. So it's a lot of, not a lot of talking, a lot of discussion around models and scenarios.
Great. Thank you, Annemie. Og vi